Hey Defenders, welcome back. In this video, I want to talk about how we can use Kibana to put together a dashboard that is both pleasing on the eye, is user-friendly, and presents our data to us in a much quicker fashion. So stick around and we'll jump into it. But first, time for my shameless plug. If you want to learn more about our company, head on over to opensecure.co. If you would like to hire us for a project, select the Hire Us button at the top of this video. To see firsthand the power of open source technology, take advantage of our interactive demo. Select the demo button and start exploring. Now let's get back to the video. So as many of you should be aware of already, we kind of have a few pieces that make up our security stack, right? We have our Wazuh agent, we have our Wazuh manager, we have Elasticsearch, we have FileBeat, and we have Kibana. And Kibana is our web UI, and that's what we use to query our data, to interact with our Wazuh agents in the Wazuh app plugin. And that's how we use Kibana to also send queries to Elasticsearch without us having to manually make API calls, right? Kibana provides us with this friendly UI and lets us interact with our Elastic cluster in a much user-friendly way. And so, as you guys should be familiar with already, we have our Wazuh app plugin. And this is good for listing like security events. You see they already have their own kind of built-in dashboards that, kind of look pleasing on the eye, but ciphering through this data and alerts can still be rather cumbersome. And what we can do is use Kibana as built-in, not built-in, we'll be able to create our own dashboards and visualizations with the power of Kibana, and we have a very user-friendly way of doing this, and your possibilities are pretty much endless in terms of how you want to view and interpret your data. And it's really powerful and really serves in our benefit. Because even here, right, this is still kind of sore on the eye. You're having to manually scroll down through all of these logs. And there's not a quick way for us to filter on something without having to scroll for a while, right? So while, yeah, I could filter out this rule description over the last 24 hours, if I want to find another rule description, I may have to scroll all the way down, and that can lead to us missing important alerts, right, that we may want to be made aware about. So, like I said, Wazuh has a few of their, pre-built-in dashboards that, are good, and you can maybe use as examples when creating your own, right, visualizations and dashboards. And you also can't add to these, which kind of sucks as well. So like if I wanted to add or remove a visualization from this, you wouldn't be able to. But what we can do is go and create our own within Kibana, right? So Kibana allows us to create visualizations, and these visualizations allow us to make up a dashboard. So think of it like where you see my border of the rectangle here, right? This would be one visualization. This the map is another visualization, and etc. So you can see these other visualizations. So then these visualizations make up this one dashboard. And these visualizations, what's great about it and really makes it powerful is they don't have to contain the same data, right? So you can create visualizations that present to you different data, and you can then filter on that accordingly, and whatever you may select on will then be filtered on throughout the overall dashboard. So for example, let's say so at the top we have a timeline of our various rule groups, right? So we have some syslog events, some authentication fails, some SSH attempts, invalid logins, etc. We then have a map, and I haven't, these are supposed to be little beer icons, but I don't know. I'll let you guys be the judge of that. And put your favorite beer in the comment section. I'd be curious to know what you guys like to drink. I think mine would be, as of now, Coors Light. I like to keep it plain and simple, and y'all probably call me boring for that, but that's my go-to on a hot summer day. And being in Texas, we're filled with lots of hot and summer days. But so keep it on going here. So for example, let's say I want to filter on authentication fails, right? So I have a visualization that counts up and totals the rule groups, right? Amount of hits per rule group. So let's say I want to look on all the authentication fails. All I had to do was click that entry, right? And we then filter on. It adds the whole filter of authentication failed for rule groups to all of my dashboard, right? So that would include all of the visualizations that make up the dashboard. So you saw some of these numerical values changed, the host names changed, the data within the visualizations changed. So now within the user login attempts, I will only get rule descriptions that match the authentication failed filter, right? So you notice under login success, we don't have any data because it's within that visualization that isn't comprised of it's not made of a rule group of authentication failed, right? So if I filter that out, we'll then see this guy come back, right? So we can see an authentication success. Let's go ahead and filter on this guy, and we'll see the dashboard change again. And I can see now where successful logins have taken place, right? So exit that out, and now our visualization, or sorry, our dashboard logs filters back out with no filters set. So it's really powerful and is very user friendly and is really up to the imagination, which is what's so great about these. You can mix and mingle any kind of data that you want. As long as you're ingesting it with Elasticsearch, Kibana gives us the ability to filter on anything and everything. So it's really powerful. It's up to your imagination. And let's go ahead and configure this same dashboard. So before we create our dashboard, right, we need to create our visualization. So let's go ahead and get into that. So within Kibana, if you select the icons here under the Kibana app section of it, we have visualize. So we'll go ahead and select that. We'll then come up into create new visualizations, right? And as you can see, there's a ton of different options that they give us, right, in terms of visualizations you can use. So we have our data tables, which is what you guys see here under like user login attempts. This is a data table. We can load in controls where you can do like a drop down of, you could say, let's say like various host names of your servers. If you want to select a particular host name, you could do that there. We have our metrics, which is like our counts. This is what you see here on the rule groups count. We have heat maps, we have regular maps, we have line graphs, markdowns, which are kind of cool. If you can add your own images and stuff, you can get really fancy with that, and you can add like static text to a dashboard. So if you wanted to give your dashboard a title or something, make it a little more sophisticated looking, you could do that there. Pie charts and more. Kibana gives us the ability to create a lot of visualizations, which can then be made up of different data types, right? So I'm going to go ahead and replicate what I've created here. So this alerts timeline is you may think it's a line graph. It's actually not. You can do a more sophisticated line graph called a TSVB is what they call, which they call a time series using a visual pipeline interface. So I feel like these ones just look cooler compared to just a line graph, so that's why I like. And what's cool too, right, is if you hover over, you can see the numerical values are changing depending on how many hits occurred during that time span or during that time stamp, which is cool. So we'll go ahead and select that guy. We'll go ahead and let me make sure that's not cut off for you guys. I know that sometimes happens. We'll go ahead and and you can do a few different things, right? You can do a time series, a metrics, a top N, a gauge, the markdown, like I was kind of talking about, and then I haven't played around with that too much, and then a data table as well that you can do. But I like to use the time series one for this, so you can see the line graph is already coming in. And then we have a few options down here, right? We have a data table, panel options, annotation, and an annotation where you could add your own data source if you want. So first and foremost, in our panel options, we need to set our index pattern. So you can see it defaulted to Wazuh monitoring. Well, our alerts are stored within Wazuh-alerts. So let's go ahead and filter on that, and now you can see, and what's also cool about this visualization is it changes in real time, like you saw. So as I make a change, it changes on real time. And then with data, so you can see now it's just doing the counts of, this is incorporating all entries within the Wazuh alert, right? So if you want to think about it, it would be like every instance of an alert coming in that you see here, right? Actually, another thing I like to do is bring up my Discover tab. So under the Kibana with the Discover tab there, and I like to load this in a new window or a new tab, whichever works best. And then select your index pattern. And I like to bring this up for when I'm building my visualizations, because what we're going to build off of are the values that are stored here, right? So any of these values you can build a visualization around, and you can combine these into one visualization, and like I was saying, you can get really sophisticated with it. So I like to keep this open to the side so I know exactly what I can and can't filter on, and what'll filter together easily and what filters can you not combine together. And that'll be more obvious here in a sec as we get going. So, but I like to have this off to the side just so I'm not having to switch back and forth all the time and loading new pages. So we have our Wazuh alert set, and then within the data, let's go ahead and filter on account, but instead of a group of everything, like I said, so that's taking all of our entries, right? Let's just group on terms, and let's select a field. So what do we want to group on? Well, in this case, we can do rule groups is what I like to do, because looking at this, that'll include our invalid logins, our authentication fails, our syslog, all of these here are within a rule group. And so then you may think, well, where are we getting that from? Well, if we go here, we see our rule groups, right? So I see that this particular rule belongs to these 3 rule groups. So we can go ahead and filter on rule.groups. So then you can see all of our rule groups came in, started to populate, right? So what if let's filter on the MITRE attack, right? So here's another one. So instead of rule groups, let's say I want to build a time series off of this guy. We'll go ahead and select that, and then you can see that populates in here, right? And oh, this credential access is dominating the results. So if I filter that out, then I can see the other ones coming in. And you can just select if you want to have these guys appear on the graph or not, which is kind of cool. So this is a lot more dynamic than just the line graph that they give you. But I'll go ahead and do rule.groups. Well, actually, here, let me stress on how we can build these. And once you kind of have your aha moment on how you can bring data into a visualization, they're all pretty much built the same, which is nice. There's some are more sophisticated than others. You can get into averages. You can set functions on them. So you can get more sophisticated. But let's say I want to bring in like data.source IPs, right? Let's say I'm interested in seeing what that is. So if I select that, put it in here, we now see all of these source IPs that have generated a Wazuh alert, right? So that's pretty cool. So I could filter and view a time series of that accordingly. And they you can get more sophisticated on like the colors and things like that. I think if you go into options, maybe, yeah, there's a color theme. So if I want a rainbow gradient, I don't like the gradient. I like the default. But I think you could create your own and stuff if you want, but I'm not too worried about that for now. So now we can go ahead and let me go back. And as you can also see, we can include and exclude. So maybe I want to exclude IP addresses that I know that I'm coming from, right? So like maybe that's a jump server or something like that I want to filter out from results. I can do that here if I want. So let's go ahead and change this back to rule groups, since that's how we're doing our example. Filter that out, and I'll save that. And I'll just say timeline Wazuh alerts. Let me preface all these with demo. Okay. All right, so now we have our alerts timeline here. Now let's build our map. So we follow the same steps. If we go to visualize, we'll do create visualization. I'll go ahead and select maps. And then I will add a layer. We're gonna go ahead and select within Elasticsearch, I like to use the documents. So we'll select documents. We'll select an index pattern now. And our alerts, right, come into our Wazuh-alerts index. So if we select that, it then pre-populates with any geospatial fields, right? So you notice there's only 2, right? And how we get that actually is, I can show you guys how we get that, but you can see our geolocation location is not a text, field or a number field, like how our rule level is, right? And if you're confused about that, or maybe you want to verify if your data is a text or geopoint or something like that, we can go into stack management. So open that up in a new tab. And we can then go into index patterns, and we'll go ahead and select our Wazuh alerts. And if we load our geolocation.location, we see that comes in as a type geopoint, right? So like you can see our timestamp is type date, there's type strings, there's type numbers. So depending on the data you're ingesting, you can also hard set these too, right? So if I want to change this and be like, Elasticsearch thinks it's a number, but I want to change it to a string, that's something you can do here. And that's kind of out of the scope of this video, so I'll have another kind of more advanced Elasticsearch file beat tuning here in the next few videos, so stay tuned for that and we'll tackle that then. But that's just a quick way if you see, well, why can't I filter on something within the map that I want to be able to filter on? And maybe because the map is looking for a geopoint and the data that you're trying to load in isn't actually a geopoint. So if I select that, we can see it loads in here. If I then add a layer, and so what that's doing is for every Wazuh alert, right, it's taking this geolocation.location, right, which is a longitude and latitude of the source IP. And that's this is happening under the hood with Wazuh's file beat ingest pipeline. That's Wazuh is taking care of that under the hood. So it's taking a source IP and looking up the latitude and longitude of that for us already. And so we add the layer, and then we can add in an icon if we want, what I like to do. So I had the beer bottles, maybe. I like baseball. I grew up playing baseball, so we can add that for this tutorial. And I'll add just a random color here. That's kind of gross. Maybe like a red. That's fine. So we can add that, and we can save this guy, and I'll call this guy just demo Wazuh map. All right, so we have that created. Now let's look at our rule groups count. So we'll go back into visualizations here. Create a new one, and this guy will be a metric. So it displays a calculation as a single number. So what this will do is add up all of our instances of, you know, whatever we want to filter on, and provide that total for us. So here you see with this one, it's a little different, right? It's asking for a source. Well, and our source is going to be our index pattern, which is Wazuh dash alerts. I don't know why that's weird. I don't know why it's not finding it if I keep typing it out, but so we have that here. And then, so it's bringing the total of all of our counts. But let's say I want to filter on specific, for our demo here, these are rule groups, right? So for my bucket, I want to do a split group. I will then select terms. For pretty much all of our visualizations, we'll select terms. You can do significant terms if you want it to be like only one term and not include others. You can do ranges, date range, where like some of these will take into effect are the type of the data source, right? So like, for example, the date range will only bring in type dates, so that's all you'll be able to load there, where the terms is a little more flexible, and so I like to use that. So for field, we'll do our data field, our groups field again, which is under rule.groups. We can set our size, so if I update this, you can see it brings in 5, and that's because we have it set to 5. Let's say I want to do the top 10. If I change that to a 10, we see it brings in more. So you can kind of limit it here as well in terms of your size. And you can create a label. So for this one, I'll just do rule groups. Or I'll say rule groups count. And update that. So, and that's, you know, that's it. That's how quick and easy that is, right? We can, as long as you kind of have an idea, once you have an idea of the data that's contained within your logs, the fields they are, how you can, you know, kind of mix and match them. You can really get as complex or as simple and as imaginative as you can be. We really, Kibana gives us the power to really kind of do whatever we can think of, which is really nice. So say like for these fields, so doing another example again, let's say I want to do the source IPs. So I want to count up how many times a particular source IP has triggered a log, so or triggered an alert. So if I put that in here, do an update, we can now see how many times a particular source IP has triggered an alert, right? So we can see these guys are really high. These I'm sure are just bots that are hitting anything and everything that they can, and I have port 22 open to the internet, so for these demo boxes, so anything and everything that can hit them is trying to hit them. So, but that's you know, kind of an example of, you know, we can filter on whatever we want. Let's do geolocation, right? Let's see what city is triggering the most hits. If I go and filter that, we can now see cities that are triggering the most Wazuh alerts, right? So that's cool. I'll go back into my rule groups and save that off, and we'll call it demo. Just call it rule group counts. All right. And now we have our host names. So this one will allow us to quickly select one of these. So let's say I want to see all the alerts that have hit my Wazuh manager, right? If I select that, it filters out, it sets a filter for agent name of Wazuh manager, right? And we can now see my Linux box, which is the agent, is not here anymore. So these alerts only pertain to our Wazuh manager, not our Wazuh agent. So, but in a, you know, practical production environment, you would have, different host names, maybe server 1, 2, 3, 4. If you want to just look at a particular server name, you could easily filter that in here. So let's go ahead and build that out. And that guy is called a tag cloud. So I'll select tag cloud here. Again, I'll choose my index. So Wazuh alerts. I will add a bucket again, and I'll add a tag. And I'll select terms, same steps. And for here, since we get our agent name as a field, right? So that'll correspond to, in an actual environment, server 1, server 2, server 3, whatever the host name of the box is. But I'll select that here, and I'll say host names, update that, and we have them loaded in here. So again, I have since I only have 2, right? I only have my Wazuh manager and Wazuh agent. So only 2 are going to appear here, where there could be a size of 5. But if you have a lot more servers, or you want to do like the top 10 servers, that's you could set that size accordingly here. And what's cool about this too is depending on the number of alerts that they have will dictate the size, right? So if I filter out this guy, you can see the Linux tag is bigger than the Wazuh manager, and that's because the Linux host, my Linux Wazuh agent has a lot more alerts that have fired on it than the Wazuh manager. So that's kind of cool. You can quickly visually see, oh, this guy has a lot more alerts than counting up, all of the logs and all of the alerts themselves. So that's a nice little perk there. So we'll save this off. Call it demo host names, save that. And now we are on to user login attempts. So, and this guy will be a data table. These are, I use data tables a lot because these I feel like are the most detailed, and you'll kind of see why here in a sec and why I kind of like them. So go back to visualize. Create a data table here, select my index, and I'll add a bucket. And so what I'll do here is we're filtering on login attempts. So I'll split my rows and select terms, and I'll filter on rule.description. So I'll load in what we have here. And we'll go ahead and set a label for just rule, and I'll go ahead and update. And we see those are now being brought in. And now let's actually set a filter just on a rule group, or just a rule that belongs to the rule group authentication failed, since we're looking just for login attempts, not successful logins, right? So up here in the add filter, I will go ahead and search for rule.groups, and I'll say is. There's a few other operators you can use here, which depending on what you want to filter in or out, you can take advantage of. And I'll do the value of authentication failed, right? And we'll go ahead and save that. And what's nice about this is this filter won't apply to your whole dashboard. It'll only apply to this visualization, which is nice because we can now set a filter within our visualization without it impacting other visualizations on the dashboard. And if we refresh on that, we see that loaded in, and now it's only rules that are bundled within the authentication failed group, right? So that's good. And now let's add another column to our visualization here, to our data table, right? Let's add the username. So what this will do is tell us the username that triggered this rule, right? Which is nice. So now I'm not having to, drill down and then scroll down and scroll up and so forth. I can present it in a much more user-friendly way. So, and for that, I can just minimize the split rows, and we'll do the same thing. We'll just add a new row, right? So I'll split the row again, go ahead and select terms, and select the user, or the field that contains the username, which is our source.user, or sorry, data.sourceUser. So I have my terms. I'll paste my field in here, and we'll do 100. And for the label, I'll just set it to username. Update that, and now it's brought in, right? Which is nice. So now we get the username that triggered this alert, which is nice to have too. And so we can go ahead and save this. We'll say demo user login attempts, and move on to the next one. All right, and now let's go ahead and build our user login success table. So we'll go back into our visualizations, create new, and we're going to create a data table again. We'll point to our index, and we'll do the same approach. Terms, and we'll do rule.description. Do a custom of rule, update that out. And now instead of our rule groups being authentication failed, we'll go ahead and filter on authentication success. So if we then save that out, let me go back. I'll do 48 hours. And what's nice too is you can filter your time range accordingly here within the visualization, so that's nice too. And so now we can see what's loaded into our data table is only a rule that matches the authentication success. So that's good, and we'll also add the username. Okay, so actually this is good. So this log doesn't have the field name source user. So what we can do, and this is why again I like to have my Discover tab open. So let's go ahead and filter on, let's filter that guy out. We'll groups. Save that, and we'll do the last 48 hours. And so if we see here, our username is actually a destination user. So there's an example of why I like to have this guy open to the side as well. So you can see, okay, within this log that I'm trying to bring in, what are the fields that I need to filter on. So if we change that to destination user, then bang, we get our username set there. So I'll change that to username, update, save this guy off. Say user login success, save that. And we'll move on to the next one, which will be command ran. And will also be a data table again. So I'll come in here, create a data table. Split rows, and let's see what I'm filtering on here. Data.audit.command, okay. So we'll bring our terms out, data.audit.command. I'll increase the size and set the title to command ran. Okay, and now we're also bringing the user ID that ran the command, right? So if it was ran by root or these other users, or this other one user that is running some of these other commands. And that's kind of helpful because then I can correlate, user ID to the username that ran something, right? Which is nice to have. And that was the audit. That's probably not going to copy very cleanly, so go ahead and split that row out, add this guy, a UID, set that size, set our user label to user ID, okay, and save that. Say demo command ran. Save that off. And what's our last one here? Okay, so our last one here is not a visualization per se, but a saved search. So within our Discover tab here, we can save searches, which is nice. So let's say I wanted to filter on our rule groups for authentication success. I can save this search, so then if I have some complex filters that I don't want to have to do again and again all the time when I'm looking to reload it, we can open one of our saved searches. So, and it'll also bring in whatever columns that you toggle on, which is nice too. So in our example here, I bring in the rule.description. So if we go back to our Discover tab, and all you have to do for this is select the Discover tab. We'll go into it, make sure you're on the index pattern that you want to filter on. And we will go ahead and toggle our column of rule description so that we don't have to drill down when looking at it on the dashboard. We just get it right here, right? So I'm not having to open this guy up and drill down. And so we got that toggled out, and I'll go ahead and save. And it'll ask us for a title. I'll just call it Demo Wazuh Alerts. And we'll go ahead and save that off. And I like to bring that onto my dashboards because this contains all the metadata surrounding the alert, right? So let's say, you know, I don't have a visualization that's bringing in something more, right? So maybe I want to see, okay, what host did this particular rule trigger on? And I don't have like my host names column or something like that, right? Or maybe I want the exact timestamp the alert was fired. Well, now I can expand it and look at all the metadata around that, right? So just because it's not in one of my visualizations, if we bring in a save search, we can see all the metadata around the alert without having to open a new tab and, you know, and create a new filter on it. So that's why I always like to bring this in. So this dashboard will kind of be my one-stop shop, and I won't have to open multiple tabs. I won't have to go to the Discover tab to view some of the metadata around it that I may not be bringing in to my dashboard already. All right, so now that we have our visualization saved, we'll actually go into dashboard, and we will select create dashboard, and now it's asking us to add or and now it's asking us to add in visualizations, right? So what we can do is go into add here, and it'll load up our visualizations that we can bring in. And you can do a save search, you can search on a string, particular string. So I prefaced on mine with demo. So we'll go ahead and load that up, and you can see that the symbols here dictate kind of what the visualizations are, whether it's a map, a data table, a metric. And it's easy enough as we can just click all these guys and it'll load them into my dashboard, and you can see how they're loading into the background there. And then what's also really nice about Kibana is it's really drag and drop. So you can see it spaces them out evenly and does about half the dashboard. Let's say I want to drag this timeline one all the way across. It's as easy as just dragging it over, which is nice. So, and we can size these all up accordingly, however we want to. And so I'll kind of make the map a little bigger. Got my baseball players. Let's see if we can replicate it like exactly what we have here. Okay, and then I have the groups count and the host names. Okay. Groups count, host name, then we have our login attempts, and then successes. Okay, commands ran, we can make this bigger. I always like to make my save searches span the whole size of my window here that I have available. And then we can save, and it's as easy as that. What's nice, it's nice how drag and drop. It's nice having the ability to just drag and drop on your dashboards. We'll call this dashboard demo Wazuh alert, and we'll go ahead and save that off. And so now, right, we have built our first dashboard, right? So it's exciting. And now you can see the things that we filtered on within our visualizations, right, are brought into our dashboard and are populating on our dashboard, where now let's say, okay, let me look at all authentication failures, right? So it's as easy as just clicking that guy. It applies the filter to our whole dashboard accordingly. And now all my visualizations loading behind it only relate to authentication fails, which is nice. So you can see we have no login success logs come in because, well, the authentication failed is what we have no user login logs because we're filtering on authentication fails, right? And we can also see the Wazuh manager has a lot more authentication fail alerts than our Linux Wazuh agent does, right? So that's why we can immediately see that, and what makes this cloud tag a good visualization to have. And we can also see usernames that are failing in. Maybe, okay, so let's say now I want to add in, what are some of the source IPs that are responsible for this, right? So let's say I'm curious in the admin username. So I filter on the admin username, and all of a sudden, bam, our dashboard changes again, right? So we now have a timeline of authentication fails that were with the admin user, right? So we can see our dashboard reflects that accordingly. And then down below, let's say, okay, let me start to look at some of the raw logs. Let me parse out some of the source IP that are triggering these alerts. So I can toggle that, and you can see it added it to the end here. We see all of our IP addresses. Maybe I'm interested in just one IP address. Okay, so I can filter on that, and it'll add that dashboard, or it'll add that filter to our dashboard, and all of our visualizations change accordingly, which is nice. So now I have, from just a dashboard and just pointing and clicking, I'm able to filter on authentication failures for a particular username from a particular source IP, right? And I can see all of the metadata around that, which is really nice. And what really makes these dashboards in Kibana so powerful, and like I was saying earlier, the possibilities are really endless. It's up to your imagination. You can, maybe I create a dashboard off of, we talked about Sysmon and getting Sysmon logs and DNS queries that are captured by Sysmon. Maybe I have a dashboard that is resolved around DNS queries, and that's what I'm reflecting there. Maybe I built a dashboard on, maybe I'm receiving firewall logs, and I build a dashboard around active connections that are currently open, right? And possibilities are endless in terms of how you want to splice and create your dashboards. I'd be curious to know what some of you guys come up with and some of you guys' ideas. So I appreciate you guys joining me in this video, and I will see you soon. And as always, let me know down below what you liked or disliked about this video, any errors I may have made, as well as recommendations for other open source tools you think I should explore.